Hi, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast. Episode 68 is an interview with Rob Preston. Rob is one of Australia's leading navigators and endurance athletes. He started navigation as a kid through orienteering and then went on to compete for Australia for 15 years at the elite level. And now, along with his wife, Kathryn, they won the World 24-Hour Rogaining, which is long distance orienteering, championships in 2016. Rob has also been leading Australian adventure racing teams around the world and has 2 World Championship medals from the Adventure Racing World Championships. More recently, Rob and Team Gippsland Adventure placed 3rd in Eco Challenge Fiji, now being showcased as a 10-part series on Amazon Prime at World's Toughest Race. Rob also offers navigation and adventure racing training, and more details can be found at thoughtsports.com.au/training. And if you are interested in trying adventure racing, check out Rob's new event, Explore Gippsland Adventure Race, which will premiere hopefully in early 2021 when COVID-19 restrictions ease. Go to exploregippsland.com.au. Find Rob on Instagram, Rob_Preston. Do you have injuries or niggles ruining your enjoyment of running and hindering your performance? As the weather improves, we are all loving our time outside running, but when it hurts with aches and pains, it's no fun at all. Come in and see the specialists at Health and High Performance, where, utilising the latest in technology and experience, they can help you to achieve the results you want and are capable of. So, head to healthhp.com.au/run or find them on Instagram, Health High Performance. In these times, it's more important than ever to have a structured plan to ensure you maximise the time that you have for training. The benefit of online training is it doesn't matter what state or country you are in, I can help you reach your athletic peak. Staying committed to your training is one thing you can really have control over at the moment. If you need an individualised plan, email me, Isabel, at peakendurancecoaching.com.au to get started. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Rating, reviewing and sharing helps more people find it. Inderdog ×3 gave a 5-star rating and wrote, "It takes a special talent to be an outstanding athlete, have a wealth of knowledge and present it in an interesting way." Thank you so much, such kind words, and it absolutely made my day to read that review. As you are now, you can come to this YouTube channel and find all of the podcasts here so that you can see the video recordings of this one and obviously other podcasts. Enjoy the interview with Rob. Hi, Rob, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, can you tell the listeners a little bit about your athletic background and how you got into adventure racing?
Sure. Look, I started off as an orienteer, so doing a lot of running and navigation with my family ever since I was a kid. And then I started taking that more seriously in my teenage years and went and did a couple of World Junior Championships and took a while to actually make the World Senior Championships. But then about 15 years ago, I guess I was getting a little bit bored of the elite orienteering scene and looking for a new challenge, and someone recommended adventure racing. And it's actually a very easy crossover sport because it does involve navigation as well. And most of a competitive adventure racing team are quite often looking for a good navigator. So having that navigation skill was an easy transition into adventure racing, and easy to find teams really looking for someone to sort of share that skill in their team. So yeah, it's been a long time in endurance sport, but yeah, I guess I still feel like I've got a lot to do.
Yeah, no, that it is a long time, but I think that's what endurance sports need, really, isn't it? And so you tend to be the nav person when you're on a team, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we did just do the world's toughest race, Eco Challenge Fiji, and which is going to bring a new buzz to adventure racing. And that was actually one of the few times where I've raced with another world-class navigator, and we had a teammate, Aaron Prince from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so we shared the navigation, but most of the time I would, do 95% of that throughout a race.
Yeah, no, that's, and was it like difficult terrain for navigating there?
Yes, it was. Look, the maps are quite large scale, which means that a lot of detail can be hidden, and also quite old maps. So the tracks weren't necessarily, up to date, and villages change and that type of thing. But we didn't actually leave the tracks as much as we expected. So not stuck in the jungle or the lost worlds of Fiji for days on end. We probably would have preferred there to be a bit more challenge. But
because correct me if I'm
wrong,
often in adventure racing, you can kind of choose your own course.
Yeah, so we have set checkpoints that you need to collect along the way. And then on top of that, there are like course notes, which have out of bounds areas in particular. And within those parameters, you can choose which way you want to go. So if it's an area that has like long, for instance, 10 kilometers between checkpoints that are with no tracks out there, well, you can choose to climb over all the mountains or to run around all the mountains. And that's the real sort of appeal to the sport, is that you've got to be physically strong, but then it throws in a bit of strategy as well about how will you navigate, and also thinking about things about what time of the day you might be at a certain part of the course, because navigating at night is actually far harder than the daytime. So you need to plan accordingly. If it's nighttime, you've got to be a lot more conservative.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So going right back to the beginning, what was the application process like to get in?
Yeah, so look, they had hundreds and hundreds of applications. It was back at the end of 2018, and we just needed to submit our sporting resume for the 5 team members, and then put together a 10 or 15 minute video outlining sort of why we wanted to race and our history and experience, and also being able to show that you can communicate, because of course it was made into a documentary / reality TV. So you didn't necessarily get in just based on your athletic background. They did choose to put in some teams with a little bit more special interest than all the regular adventure racing teams that take part in the World Series.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And you say 5 team members. Is that including the person who is at the checkpoints waiting for you and helping you?
Yeah, that's right. So we had a 1-person support crew, and they helped as we went around the course. And look, some races you need to bring a 5th team member, but more often than not, it's been made easier, for the sport, that the race organisers will organise the logistics, and then we just need to travel with the 4 team members.
So, can you talk us through how it went, like building up to the day? So you'd have got to Fiji, and sort of like how long in advance did you get there? And then how were you feeling at the start?
We only got there about 4 or 5 days before we started, and in that time there was about 3 days of like compulsory tests or skill testing. Because it was 66 teams, it was quite a large field, and it takes a fair bit of time each team to get through all of that, along with media interviews. But even without that, it takes a lot of time to like pack your gear. You need to do extra food shopping if you haven't brought all of it to the country with you. And then they actually released only small bits of information about the course before we started. So again, that's a different part. Every race is different. But in this case, we didn't even know until about 3 minutes before we started what we were going to be doing for that day. You just needed to, I think the night before we got told, oh, look, you'll be gone for 12 to 36 hours, and you'll start off on water and pack accordingly. And then
does that make you like really nervous not knowing?
Yes. So certainly, for a course that's going to be 5 or 10 days long, you need to, you don't want to be thinking about the finish line. There's a lot to get past before you get to the finish, but it does also help to build that mental picture of what the course is going to be like, so you can start to tick it off. In this case, we had like 5 different sections to the race, and we only got to see our support crew like 4 times, so in between each of those. But the hard part was we didn't know what course or what sports we're going to be doing until we got to that transition point.
So you didn't. So in a normal adventure race, would you get an overview of everything?
Quite often you do, yeah, more often than not. And so therefore you get like a logistics planner that you can then pack your food and your shoes for that leg and your bikes and prepare that before you start. In this case, because we had a support crew, they could kind of leave that to be done on the fly.
Yeah.
But then it does make that difficult for like planning your sleep, planning to, are you going to go really hard in one section or, take it easy because you know what's coming up, but the next section is going to be even harder. So yeah, that was definitely a difficult part of Eco Challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched it, but I didn't realise that that's how it was. It didn't click for me. Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah, I looked. It's 10 episodes, but there's still so much detail in there that they just can't show around the race. Particularly the race at the front with all the top lead teams, and that's probably where we've been getting the most questions. Is actually about sort of specific details of how the race really unfolded for our team.
Yeah. So how did it really unfold for your team?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just had a quick word with my wife about the highs and lows of the race, just because, it was 12 months ago. And even though we've recently watched the series, you do start to lose the details. But look, for us, we actually took it really quite conservatively, and we got off to a bad start, which wasn't shown on the coverage, is that our boat got punctured. And
I actually read that when I got online, we're doing some research, and I read that and I was thinking, I didn't see that in the show.
No, so we were like dead last. And then
how did that happen?
Work our way up. So the boats have some very sharp points on the front of the outriggers on the side, and we were really enclosed in this river. Everyone just sort of went right from the start.
It looked very crowded.
Yeah, there wasn't enough room for everyone, and we were just unfortunate to have some teams run into us from the side, and they were, I guess, quite flimsily made boats, and we needed to stop and repair it. So it was a very stressful start, and it's kind of funny how things can go not to plan when you've been literally preparing for the last 6 months for this race, and then 5 minutes in, the whole team sort of starting to implode and yell at each other as we decide, do we want to stop? Are we going to try to keep going? In the end, we decided we needed to repair it, because we were about to go out for another 50 or 60 kilometres in open ocean. And we didn't really feel that was going to be the place to repair. So we actually stopped, before we left the river. But so then we had to just make our way through the rest of the field on the paddling leg, and slowly within 24 hours, I think we were up about into 10th place or something like that, and limiting our mistakes, passing a few teams that did make some navigation mistakes. And within sort of 36 hours, we were actually quite lucky in terms of there being a storm that needed to, the race got halted due to some difficult areas. There was some flooding, and where we were actually quite lucky was that we were the last team to make it through the flooded canyon section before the Estonians who were good friends with ours, they got stuck behind us. So then that actually ended up splitting the field a little bit. And we were able to catch back up to the leaders when the race got halted. They ended up having more rest than us.
Yes, that's right.
Were stopped for about 10 hours. We were stopped for about 7 hours. So often in adventure racing, you have what's called a dark zone. If the paddling is at night time and it's deemed to be dangerous, then the clock you don't get a time bonus, you just get more rest. So the faster teams get to an area, have more rest, which normally it equates to them moving faster for the rest of the next stage.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. And so when the race started and the teams, arguing at the start, how do you sort of move on from that?
Look, we definitely didn't expect that, because all four of us are pretty level-headed, and although we had never raced with Aaron before, he's even more experienced than myself, but it was kind of funny when you get put under that serious pressure, how you're going to deal with it. And in the end, it was a case of realizing that if we wasted half an hour now repairing the boat, it was quite possibly going to keep us in the race, as in we won't sink later on. And so it was kind of made for us a little bit when the boat literally did start sort of going underwater, that we weren't going to be able to keep going. And we were lucky that we had a basic repair kit, but there were some locals nearby who were able to sort of help. They were fishermen and helped us repair as well. But that was actually really one of the few times in the race where we had any sort of trouble. So after the first hour in the race, we actually really got along well as a team, and didn't make that many mistakes until we did make a navigation mistake on the second last night, which again isn't shown in the coverage, but that's where we were in second place. We stopped to have a sleep. And got passed by the Team Canada, and then we made a navigation mistake after the sleep, and that really just compounded our sort of dropping further behind the lead. And the Canadians actually didn't sleep, but then also made a navigation mistake. But then we just weren't able to catch them. We didn't have enough time left on the course, really, and that was the difficult part for us, in that we were really preparing for a longer race, and not being able to see the full course at the start. You're really just basing it on little bits of information that get given out at the race briefing, or you might have a word on the side with the race director, and he's talking about, it could be 8.5 days, and then Mark Burnett, the inventor of the race, is like, it could be 9.5 days, and that's if anyone finishes. So we're really preparing for something that was a little bit longer, and that's why we got a little bit more sleep along the way than what we might have if we actually knew the definite finish line for the race.
But I guess it's a risk you have to take just in case it is longer. So
that's right. I mean, we were pretty confident that that extra sleep was going to pay off later in the race, and that we were being conservative in that way. And but it's always a fine balance between getting the minimum amount of sleep that you can still keep moving and make less mistakes, than not sleeping at all. And you can definitely lose a lot of time. And
I can imagine.
And looking after the health of your team members really is. In a tropical area, infections were quite prevalent, and as it was, you kind of needed to get to the end before one of your teammates could really have trouble fighting the infections.
And you were saying you haven't raced with Aaron before, so how did you come up with the team? Obviously you hadn't raced as a full team like that previously.
No, that's correct. Look, so we had another team member, an Australian, who was fortunate enough to get selected in two teams, and he was actually in the seventh place team, Team Thunderbolt.
Yep.
And so we were sort of happy for him to make that decision, and we needed to find a replacement. And because of the competition rules meant you could have one overseas team member, so 3 from the one nation and then 1 extra. And we considered a lot of people, and we didn't make our decision overnight. And Aaron is, he's been around for 20 years. I've been competing against him in orienteering for a long time, and also actually raced with a lot of his teammates. So often if he couldn't make a team or a race, I actually had filled in for him in different times. So we knew his skill set and we knew his personality. And with such a long race, a difficult race, and a race that requires such skills, in this case, there was like 8 different sports. Going for someone with more experience was the key in our mind, rather than potentially someone younger with a faster runner, bigger engine, or that type of thing. We needed someone with the experience, and it worked out for us, fortunately.
Yeah, it sure did. And so how, obviously you do the navigating because that's what you're really experienced at. How do you choose the other team roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. And making up a really strong team in adventure racing is pretty crucial. Like, in the end, we race for 5 or 6 days, but it's all that preparation that you put in beforehand that makes so much of a difference. And so, look, having someone that's good as a leader, because often when 4 people are tired, you really having a democracy doesn't often work if no one really knows what they should be doing. So you need someone to sort of take the lead and say, well, look, no, this is what we're going to do. And that's normally the person with the most experience. And then, but also having someone with, very good organisation skills, and they're not necessarily the same person. So often the women in the team are very good organisers. They're good multitaskers. And, in my case, they can certainly help keep me organised. I know that I'm not, I'm not the best at every asset of the facet of the sport. So often having a good organiser is always going to help, because it's just one small mistake, like putting your bike shoes in the wrong box means that you could be riding in your running shoes or vice versa, and things like that. And then also it's good to have someone with the skills of working with bikes, and then also like the water sport. So if you've got someone that's really experienced on water, then they're often the one who's going to be steering a sailing boat or steering a whitewater boat. And you can also often put them with the weaker paddler as well. So it helps sort of balance out the team.
So you basically all have to be really honest about what you're good at and not so good at.
Yeah, absolutely. You see a lot of teams get formed over the internet these days, which is great to get people into the sport. But it's having the humility to actually, admit your deficiencies is actually more important than, probably saying what you're really good at. And it's those teams that maybe haven't quite formed their clear goals or define exactly what level each of their team members are at. If they've never done a race before, then it can be really hard like that. So, and then once you get into the race as well, there's no point in being the strongest athlete for 90% of the time, then if at 10% of the time you won't accept help, or you can't communicate that to your team members that, well, actually I'm struggling now, can someone please take my backpack? Or if we don't have a short rest I'm feeling nauseous, so I'm going to throw up, and that's going to slow us down in the long run. So those the communication side of it and learning how to be humble is very important as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so how much sleep did you get during the race?
We actually got more sleep in this than, say, a traditional race, because we had a sleep card, they call it. So we needed to sleep 5 times 3 hours throughout the race. And
so everybody, you had to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So it does make it safer. It makes it more enjoyable, to be honest.
I can imagine.
I've been, the sport long enough now to know that you can race on less than 3 hours a night. We've definitely done it on 1 to 2 hours, but it really then becomes a struggle to get through the next 23 to 22 hours until you get your next sleep. So a little bit more sleep makes it a lot more enjoyable and less likely to make mistakes. Because we were out there for I think 5 nights. The only night that we didn't get sleep was the first night and the last night. And that last night, even though we felt like we'd really managed ourselves quite well, we were out on the boat in the outrigger. And that was pretty difficult at that time. Personally, I was trying to steer the boat, and steering while I was half asleep, wasn't that easy, but the team, they just kept on paddling. We took a little bit to get into it. We started about midnight. And then maybe after half an hour, we really found our rhythm. But
how long did that section of that paddle take?
It took us about 7.5 hours.
Oh my God.
Whereas, and we caught up an hour and a half on the Canadian team in front of us in that time. And so we really feel like we just needed a little bit more course, and we were going to catch the remaining half an hour that they were in front of us. But we were, some of the slower teams, it would take twice as long over that period. Well, they were actually not able to paddle most of the nights where the weather was. They realised that the weather was pretty difficult out there in those outriggers at night time, and so they were often stopping on some of the islands along the way, or not even starting until the next morning when the conditions were a bit easier.
And so what did you do for nutrition throughout the race?
So because we have to pretty well buy all your food before you start, a lot of it is sports specific nutrition, though the longer the race, the more you actually want to rely on real foods. But it's probably the most important thing is having variety, and that's variety of sweet food, variety of savoury food, which in the end, the longer the race, the more savoury food you end up eating, and then you just supplement it with a little bit of sugar when you realise that you need a quick pick-me-up. But it also needs to be quite lightweight, because we could have been out there for a day to 2 days without getting any resupply. So in that case, you're taking some new dehydrated foods are getting better and better. So we'll take quite a few of those, and then even just simple things like 2-minute noodles that you put cold water in is
sounds delicious.
Nice. It is nice and salty, and surprisingly how well it cooks just in down the front of your shirt or something like that. But we really didn't have many stops along the way.
Because you were saying
more food.
And also you're saying you're only seeing your support, you didn't see your support crew that often, so you weren't getting restocked that often.
No, exactly. And so when the support crew was available to us, then Paddy he'd have a cooked meal there, and then often have just some sandwiches and things that were easy to take away with us, but aren't going to last 2 days in your
No,
backpack.
that's right.
And then try to take some fresh fruit and things like that as well, which is a great change. But again, a banana in the backpack doesn't last that long either. So.
I can yuck. And that's what I would imagine, that nutrition would be a tricky one in that situation. So you said
and
you
look,
took
trying out what you're going to take is probably one of the key things. So I've found that I can tolerate pretty much most things. So I guess that's quite lucky. But sometimes you go to a new country and you can't get your flavored, up and go or something like that. So you do need to risk and try something new. But Fiji, most of their food comes from Australia and New Zealand anyway.
Okay. Yeah. That's lucky. And so you said earlier that, you prepared 6 months for this. How do you train for a race where there's so many different activities that you have to do, sports that you have to do?
Yeah, look, that was the difficult part of this race. And even for someone as experienced as me, like, people will go, well, was it really the world's toughest race? And in terms of the preparation, it was by far the hardest that I've done. And that was because I've been in the sport for a long time, yet I've still never done any stand-up paddleboarding because I like kayaking. I didn't feel the need to learn another sport, but we needed to for this one. And, we did just enough training probably to get your skill level up, but not be really strong at it. Sports like that you thought might be a small component, but then we literally had paddled for 18 hours in a sailing boat. And then to find that we've got a 7-hour stand-up paddleboard leg. And so the teams that really hadn't prepared, very much for that at all, they suffered pretty badly on the legs that they hadn't prepared for. And then other things like the rope section. Again, we don't get to do that in a lot of races, particularly in Australia. So you really got to make the effort to go out to, a local climbing gym, or, we had some friends come out with ropes and, find a cliff and just go and do some practice. But, it was just enough to get to what I would say a competent level without being, an expert. But you're trying to get to, a competent level. We were already experts at some of the skills, fortunately, but to get all those other ones up to scratch, it took a lot of time. And for us, the outrigger paddling, we had to travel 2 hours into Melbourne to find an outrigger club. So that takes away a lot of time that you might ordinarily spend on the bike or, training on your running. But in the end, it's the weaknesses that end up sort of slowing you down more than anything else.
More than the strengths build you up.
Yeah.
And so about how many hours a week would you be training?
Look, I'm not a huge trainer. I've never
have that's been. Good to hear.
Rely on, I guess, my background in a long time, but also doing a lot of races, which has actually become less and less as we've got 2 young children now. So I can't rely on that base. But look, we're still doing 10 to 14 hours. And then, maybe if we do, we might back up one weekend to do 24-hour race in one weekend. So if you do that, once every couple of months, it starts to add up. But look, in terms of people think that you might need to do a lot more than that, but being healthy and getting to the start line without having injuries is actually more important.
Exactly.
And then knowing how to read your body as the race goes on. So in the end, you could be a professional triathlete who's used to doing 30 to 35 hours a week, yet they don't race for longer than 8 hours, those guys, pretty well. So it gets to nighttime and, it's a whole different game if you haven't learnt to, fuel yourself or to slow down when you need to.
And do you train at all for sleep deprivation? Is it possible?
Look, it is. I used to be a shift worker, and
That would help.
people would say, well, yeah, people would say, oh, well, that'll be good for your event
Yeah,
racing now. And I see other people get into the sport and going out on like all night training sessions and things like that.
yeah,
Look, that's good for the mental side, and knowing that you can do it, and you realize that it's pretty difficult. Even harder not in race conditions, I would find. Like if you're racing, you tend to be, if you're a competitive person, it does make it, relatively easy to go a full night without sleep.
yeah.
But as I've got older, I really prefer to look after my body, and I definitely don't do any type of sleep deprivation leading up to a race. It's more trying to get more sleep than anything
Yes.
else. Yeah.
And that's what I certainly do for longer races too, because also training overnight, well, it takes so long to recover from that it's really not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty well what I've done my whole career, in that there's 24-hour Rogaines that, trail running's only, let's say, only really become popular in the last 10 to 15 years, but Rogaines have been around a lot longer, and I've won most of them that I've done, but I don't do them that often because it takes so long to recover. So I just prefer to do multiple shorter races over that same period, and not, risk injury or really get yourself down, because it takes a big toll on the body.
So how many of these big adventure races would you do a year?
Look, I've done nearly 30 in a bit over 12 or 13 years or something like that. So I'm normally doing 2 to 3 a year. I started off pretty hard when I was a bit younger and did 4 of them in 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And realised that I probably won't do that many ever again. I got through it, but look, if you can have a good build up, and you can, afford the time off work, or, to be able to go and travel somewhere, then ideally I'd love to do 2 a year. But you're looking at a recovery of, a month or 2, or possibly even longer, depending on what you want to get back to. If you want to get back to running, 60-minute orienteering races, well, it'll take a long time to go from that 95 back to 100%. But whereas I could back up and do 24-hour races sort of relatively easy, but I just don't train that much in between. So there's always going to be a downside on that later down the path, because you haven't done the training to back it up.
That's right. Yeah, you can only maintain that for a certain amount of time with high-level results.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And so, obviously, you haven't. Were you able to get in a race at all this year?
No, I've done a couple of orienteering races in Melbourne in March, and that was literally like the weekend or 2 weekends before the lockdown started. And then since then, I've done nothing. And look, I think most people probably say it's been good to have a bit of a break. But I had my break really from September through to Christmas time, because the race was in Fiji was 12 months ago now. I'm looking forward to racing again, but probably more looking forward to actually being able to travel overseas, and then also put on some races of my own as well.
Nice.
Which, I've been trying to organise an event in Gippsland, a 24-hour adventure race, which is part of the National Series, and it's been postponed due to bushfires and twice due to COVID. So it hasn't been a great year, but we'll set our sights on some events next year.
So have you applied for next year of the Eco Challenge?
Yes, we have. So we're kind of in that period of waiting and hoping that our results from last year.
I'm sure they will. Through. Surely they would just let you in straight away, wouldn't they?
Oh, look, I hope so. We still had to put in the application just like everyone else. And then we still don't actually know whether it will go ahead.
Well, they
I
were
think it's
talking
unlikely to go ahead in
March.
February.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I
don't
don't
see
think it
that. I
will.
mean, it's pretty.
But their secondary date was like
It's,
September, wasn't it?
yeah, November even.
November, yeah.
Yeah, which personally I'd love to train through summer. I find it much easier than
Yeah,
the Victorian winter. But
definitely.
then again, so next year it's going to be in Patagonia,
That's right.
and the conditions there will be vastly different to Fiji. So maybe we'll need a Victorian winter to get out and get used to training in miserable conditions.
I was actually just watching the 2013 Eco Challenge in Patagonia, and it looked miserable.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I've read race reports of other races that have been in Patagonia that scare me more than than most things. A race report without even any pictures, it just sounded vastly different to, like, I've raced in Alaska, and that
Yeah,
was probably the most extreme that I've done.
yeah.
And then Patagonia I think will be quite similar to what Alaska was, with glacier travel
Yes,
and
that's right.
um, just being wet and cold probably for a long time.
And when you are wet and cold for a long time, how do you deal with that?
So that's, I guess, where again, if you compare it to being a Tour de France rider with 5% body fat, or um, if you're not, haven't looked after yourself, then you're far more susceptible to get sick along the way. And so that's where that rest, it's difficult to rest when it is very cold. Like more
Yeah,
often than not, we will actually be sleeping on the course just in like a tiny little bivvy bag,
yeah.
because if we don't have a support crew, then we have to set up tents in transitions and things like that, and it can be loud, not great places to sleep. So then when you're out in the wilderness, you've got to find somewhere that's dry, hopefully not in the wind. So those factors are going to be a lot different to Patagonia, to Fiji, where sometimes if it's a nice warm northern Queensland, you literally just lay down on the ground and
Yeah,
have a sleep, and
yeah.
that's okay. But this time you'll definitely need sleeping bags and probably put up tents to get that rest. But yeah, being cold, taking good gear, I guess, is probably the main thing. But you're still going to have wet feet, and you've got to learn to look after them.
And I guess you also just have to learn to just deal with it and just move on and not focus on it
Yeah,
too
that's
much.
right. Once you've got your hood on, and it's really windy down there is the other difficult part about
Yeah,
Patagonia. And when it's like that, it's hard to communicate with your team. So
yeah, of course.
then I guess you have to you can't take things for granted, is that your teammates have heard, what's coming up, or, I need to have a stop or something like that. And in that case, like if it's at nighttime, you can actually lose your team members. If
Oh, wow. Yeah, of
someone's
course.
feeling really sleepy,
Yeah.
they can get disorientated. So that's just a little part of trying to be aware of what your teammates are going through, and you'll have good periods, but you're going to have some bad periods
Yeah.
as well, and that's where
Yeah.
you've got to have good team members to look
Yeah.
after you.
So if some of the listeners were thinking about getting into adventure racing, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so look, we've got some good races in Victoria, and hopefully more next year. But look into the Adventure One series. So it's a national series.
Right.
There's a lot of good races in Queensland, which obviously it's not close to our core base in Victoria, but there's nothing better than hopping on a plane, even if it's for 3 days, to get to Queensland and racing some good terrain like that. And then there's also the Adventure Racing World Series, and they've got events in about 14 different countries around the world. It changes each year.
And so
And
anyone can go in those?
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't say jump straight to
No.
flying to Patagonia, although there will be some teams that, with little experience that will be
Yeah.
there next year. But in terms of getting into like some sprint races, so that's what we call, from maybe 3 to 6 hours.
Yep.
And the barriers to entry for those events are pretty low. You need a mountain bike. It doesn't have to be a very expensive one, but it's just got to get you past, an hour of mountain biking. And then having some comfortable shoes. Then the navigation side is a little bit, but I mean, most of the shorter races, you're just better off giving it a go, and you're going to learn a lot in your first race or your second race, and then see how it goes with your team members as well before you then take the full commitment to do a 24-hour race or a 5-day race with team members you don't know is risky. And look, getting the right teammates is what makes the sport really so fun, and probably why I've been in the sport for so long is that I've just always been able to find some really good teammates and never had bad experiences to say, oh, no, never again.
Yeah.
So,
is adventure racing really expensive?
Look, the longer rate, not if you compare it to an Ironman or something like that, which, $1,000 for a 1-day event. We might be looking at $250 to $400 for a weekend race or a 24-hour race. And the expedition races, you're probably looking at $1,000 to $2,000 for like the 5-day race, plus travel costs, of course. And you can spend as much money on gear as what you want, but I guess I'm always getting questions about gear, and I'm often telling people you don't need to have the best. Often buying secondhand gear is perfectly adequate to get into the sport, and there's a lot of friendly and experienced adventure racers out there who will help you with not going out and wasting your money, and even just giving you old backpacks and things like that to get started.
And so what's your race called, or will be called once it's eventually up and ready to go?
My event? Explore Gippsland. So, if you have a look,
what was that, sorry?
explore Explore Gippsland.
Explore Gippsland. Right, I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So people can look that up. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, I'm going to be running some training. Like I already do run navigation training.
Awesome.
I haven't done that many of them in the last couple of years because I prefer to compete. Let's be honest, I'm still a competitor, but I'll probably be doing quite a bit in the next 6 months while the actual event space is still a little bit up in the air. And hopefully in Victoria we'll still be able to do training sessions with 10 people easily. So it is a good opportunity for people to get into the sport, to come along and do some training, and then often actually just meet some new people while you're there, because often it might be a little bit hard to find team members, but I've had a lot of people come along to the training camps who then end up racing with each other because they've
made friends there.
Yeah, that's right.
And look, and to be honest, a lot of ultra runners for our races, we're expected to bring a map and a compass as part of our mandatory kit. But I'm telling you right now, like 80 to 90% of the ultra runners don't know what to do with it. So even for ultra runners, it's good to do that training.
Absolutely. So I actually do organise some trail runs, and I'm heavily involved in the course marking, but no matter how well you mark the course,
I know.
People get lost, and look, it's more than just having navigation skills. It's just being aware of what you're doing, and not just looking at your feet or the hills in front of you. You really need to think about what's coming up, and I definitely recommend having a look at the course profile and the map before you go out there to try to get that in your head. But even not just for races, having the skill of navigation and being confident in the outdoors, you're going to enjoy your training sessions so much better, and you go find new places. So it's unfortunately it's a skill that's being lost with the aid of smartphones.
Yes, sadly,
But yeah, sometimes it's great just to leave your phone behind and go exploring and be confident that you can find your way home, even if you're in unfamiliar terrain. So I definitely am grateful that I've had a lifetime of doing navigation. But I definitely always encourage runners even just to go try the orienteering races, which there's a lot of in Melbourne.
There's been quite a few Rogaines, and I've been myself trying to learn the navigation for my races, and it's hard. So I admire your skill set, but I think it's worthwhile doing.
Yeah, well, it's like a natural fartlek session as well.
Yeah,
because
that's right.
You need to slow down to think about what you're doing, but then those periods in between, you can push yourself running harder. And so a 45-minute orienteering course gives you real physical benefits as well as, honestly, the time will go by just, that, because you're not thinking about, oh, geez, my heart rate's 165 or, should I go harder or less, whatever. You're just thinking about the navigation side, and next thing you know, you've, an hour's down and you're at the finish.
No, that's I totally agree. That sounds awesome. All right, and final question: what was Bear Grylls like?
Yeah, look, we didn't spend a lot of time sort of hassling Bear for pictures before and after the race, but I did get a chance to talk to him the day we finished and when the cameras had been turned off. And he honestly is a very genuine guy, and I've looked at a lot of things that he's been doing in the last 12 months as well, and the work that he does with scouts. And look, I think he's been great for the show. They did really well to pick him. And a great role model, really, to encourage people to get outside. So look, he definitely has a show side to him as well, but it's not without backing it up as well. Like he's definitely not fake at all. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he was interested in what we're doing, and there's been, I guess, comments about, wouldn't it be great to see Bear race or something like that, and how well would he go? Honestly, we'd love to see that too. And I've got no doubt if he was teamed up with the right teammates, he has a lot of skills.
He'd be able to hold his own.
And fitness level, but would he be able to keep up with the top 10 team? Probably unlikely, but that's what we like to think anyway.
No, that's fair enough. And you're probably right anyway, but because I don't know, I loved watching the show and it was awesome, but it looked tough. So well done on your awesome result and for representing Australia so well. So that was.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been great watching, seeing all our friends and family and and just people we don't know get so excited about it. And we want to see more people get into the sport, and it's the pinnacle, but it doesn't mean that you can't get the same enjoyment and challenges over doing shorter races, and same as running longer and shorter races. Like everyone's got a new challenge. It definitely takes you to some pretty cool places. That's what I enjoy most about is the travel and the places we go to.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks for that.